Hey, good morning. Stefanie Small is here with me, and so we are going
Hi.
to dive into a lot of really cool stuff. Um, but first, thank you. It is 7 a.m. your time, and you look
Ooh,
bright and
baby.
shiny and put together, and I am super impressed. I can't do that at 7 a.m. usually.
There's only one way to wake up. It's like I went to sleep like I was getting up for an early flight. I woke up every half hour to make sure I hadn't missed it.
Oh no, I don't want to hear that. It
and
should not be
and then
stressful. This is fun.
and then at 6 a.m. I was like, okay, get up. So you fluff out the ringlets and try to put some mascara on so you can be seen, and then there you are.
I'm pro mascara, and I'm getting back into lip gloss, but for like 2 years, no one could tell, and it just made my masks look funky. So I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't need that." But now we were talking, and I know we're going to talk about how to look good on Zoom. I generally have Zoom earrings, and I've only met a couple other people who do. So I usually keep them on my desk, and I like frantically try to jam them in, but one broke this morning while I was doing that. But I also have Zoom lip gloss as a result. It just
Very,
helps me
very important things. Yeah.
like feel ready to show up
hmm
and all the
As
things. And so that's
one of
part
the
of what we
important
want to talk about, right? Is like how to
It
show
is
up
a big
confidently.
part of what we talk about. It is a big part of what we talk about for sure. There's absolutely nothing natural about being on camera. And so even one's own radiant natural beauty that one shines in the real life um, doesn't really count so much online and on camera. There's a whole lot that it's like you should everyone kind of assumes that they start here. It's not just physicality, it's presentation, it's emotional readiness. If here's zero, here's where we all are. And so, yeah, we'll get into it, but we kind of want to just bring everybody up to here. And so that's what we target a lot when we're talking about getting folks ready to be effective communicators online.
It's funny. I was on a tour bus I only did it for a year, but I'd sit up at the front and I'd be managing these tours. And it was like, you almost have to put on, and it's not any less me, right? It's still me. It's just like me
Mhm.
times 10 to protect the
Yeah.
inside portion. So yeah, I want to talk about that, but how you've had a really interesting career. You're a media strategist and web designer, which is not something that you see really frequently. How did you get here?
I started working as a child actor when I was 5 years old. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I promise it was very, very normal back in the day. Like, I had friends who did acting, I had friends who did soccer, I had friends who did horseback riding. Like, it was just something that people did. And so I loved it. And it was really fun to do. And so I started doing acting training and camera training and all of that when I was super little. Little did I know how much it would matter later in my life. I just did it because it was fun. And I stopped doing that when I hit 6 feet tall, because then I was much taller than all the men who were supposed to be playing my dad. So by like 14, I was like, okay, well, this isn't working for me anymore. So I stopped doing that. And I really kind of switched to doing more behind the scenes stuff. I loved doing that, but it turns out I was actually a really good producer. And being a producer means keeping a big picture, holding your budget, gathering the right people, organizing the days. Like, I'm just really good at organizing, and I loved it. And I was like, very satisfying to me. And I went, okay, so I held on to that.
The world needs
And
people like you.
I know, but it's because my mom's a big picture person. And so my sister went even into more crazy detail than I am. She became an architect who really focuses on like medical stuff. So her stuff, minutia is down to the 30 seconds of an inch to make sure that wheelchairs can pass each other in the hallways of the hospital she builds, right? So we both went down this road of fastidiousness that is not my mom's forte. She's great at other things, but it was a reaction, so watch out for your kids. You never know.
That's so interesting. So I come
Yeah.
from a family of planners, and they are amazing humans. But whenever my mom and her siblings get together, it's like, how should we do this? And how should we do this? And it's like, you know what? I'm out. Just tell me what we're doing and I will show up. Um, and I do
So
like
I
to
went,
plan, but it's like I'm a good like big picture person at the front end, and I'm
yeah,
a good like
yeah,
hands-on person. But if it's an
yeah,
event with lots
no.
of moving parts, someone else should really manage that.
See, it takes both kinds. It takes both kinds. I just realized like where I get the greatest amount of satisfaction is in a well-executed experience. And that translated, I went after college, I was a radio, television, film major at Northwestern, and that meant a lot of hands-on time. But then I realized I actually didn't like cameras very much. I was like, I don't really care that much about that part of it. But again, I was like, oh, producing. So I went into publicity work, into the arts. I worked for a major performing arts presenter here in the West Coast. We did a lot of sort of similar to BAM, like Brooklyn Academy of Music in Brooklyn, New York. We do a lot of the West Coast launches of American premieres or national tours that started here. And so I had so much fun doing all of these really extraordinary artistic events. I mean, it was a master's education in the world of fine art. However, after a few years, I was like, okay, I don't want to spend all day and all night at work forever. So I need to figure out a kind of a new trajectory. And I started working with a different arts presenter, and that was trickier. She did the national Broadway tours, which was really, really fun. But then she also did local shows, and this is the input that I didn't have this input at the time. It's all in retrospect, I kind of realized this. But she also did a lot of local stuff where we were talking about like Fiddler on the Roof, and then as a publicist, my job is to make things interesting and relevant to the public, right? It's not a good distinction perhaps for people to remember. Marketing is bought usually, although the lines blur somewhat with social now, but marketing is purchased when I was doing this hardcore, and publicity is earned. So I had to figure out how to make the 700 millionth production of Fiddler on the Roof interesting. And so I had to sit down with these kind of things that we were talking about all the time and go, what is it that makes it interesting? Is it the cast? Is it somebody in the orchestra? Is it the producers? Is it the venue? Like, what is it that makes this production relevant and necessary? And that kind of strategy, again and again and again over years, you hone this. It's a muscle, right? You hone that muscle to figure out how it is to talk about something in a relevant, meaningful way.
And what is the angle that's going to get people to stand up, pay attention, take notice? Yeah.
Take notice and take action, right? In this case, they had to go buy a ticket. They actually had to, they had to put money down to be like, okay, I know all the words to all these songs. However, I've never seen it where Tevia's family was an actual family before, right? So the whole family is one family. That's kind of cool. Like, let's go support that family. Or the teacher of the local high school is Tevia, and 20 of the townspeople are his students. Like, that's kind of cool. And then you talk about that, and then people who, school supporters want to come. So there's lots of ways to engage a community around a topic that they already know about, even if they think they already know all about it. There's a lot of ways that attack in that you can go, oh, I see how that's interesting and relevant to me. I'm going to try it, right? So that was a muscle I honed for years. Again, then I hit a point where I was like, okay, I don't want to do all day, all night, and all weekend for the rest of my life. So
right, whose life is ideal anyway?
Exactly. So I was like, okay, so it's time to switch. But I had done that over these very small projects and then major American tours. And so but the truth is, it didn't really matter, right? The way in was always the same. It was a strategy session with the topic in mind, and then you had to break down the necessary ways to go about telling that story. And so I then went to a nonprofit that was focused on, at the time, they were focused on small business development in communities around the country. And then small businesses that, it was the same thing. Well, how are you talking about the community? That was literally the issues of these towns that were having trouble. They were Rust Belt towns that had a certain identity, and people were leaving them in droves. And so these chambers of commerce would go, well, how do we reinvent this community?
Wow.
And so
how do we become an agile community? That's an interesting concept, like using some of the big buzzwords today. Like, how do we adapt with the changing marketplace, so to speak?
And so the group that I was working with had a rather extraordinary way that they went about doing their alignment with various community builders, including the media that was telling the story of the community. But part of my job for the nonprofit was to help tell the stories of what they were doing. So that was more like on location media development. And of course, I'd done all of that with my various clients too, getting them up in the morning and on national television or local television, at least, to promote what they were doing online. So I had done a whole lot of like media stuff, right? fast forward, 2020, and the
Things
whole world
change.
changes, right? And I go, oh God. And so then I had to stop and cry. There's some crying. And then we did some self assessment. And I go, what is it that I can do? And I went, okay, right away, like, okay, grip, hold myself and rock a little. I can write. Fine, I can write. I'll go that direction. And then as I was writing stuff, I was like, well, actually, I can do a lot more than write. Like I can, because people were like, I need help for like writing my bio. And I'd kept independent clients before. I had folks along the way who were like, can you help me put together my bio, my media materials, my presentation kit, all of that sort of thing. So that wasn't totally foreign, but it had been strictly writing. But then in 2020, everything, right, had to be put online. And so you go, well, people would say, I need some photos too. Can you help me like figure out how to take photos? I was like, yeah, I've run a lot of photo shoots and I have a stable of photographers in the area. Yes, I can do that. That's a very big skill set. So I was like, okay, I should add that to my list of things that I do. And then they're like, oh, I don't really have time to build my website. Could you actually do that? Okay, I'll teach myself. Yes, Squarespace.
Why not?
Yeah, I can. I did. And so I did. I taught myself Squarespace and I was like, okay, so I can do video, photos, writing. Okay, I got all of that. And who do I like doing it for? I really love working with individuals because especially individuals in the sort of mid-career, senior career space where they're like, people retired and they're like, I want to make this passion project my life. I'm tired of waiting. People who came out of the world where they would work for a bigger entity and they're like, I don't want to go back to an office. All of that landed. And I was like, I love working with individuals. They're really, well, at the beginning, especially, they're really like nice. They're really grateful. They don't have a, you
Nice
know,
is important. Nice is extremely important, Stephanie.
yeah, I know. And again, it wasn't like it was, I have in my particular case, like my early clients, I had a lot of folks who were working in the health and wellness space because they really had to do this drastic transition to no more clubs, right? Or no more gyms and stuff. And they're like, okay, I'm on my own now. We're doing this at home. So I had that transition. But yeah, the retired folks who were like, guess what? I'm an astrophysicist and a musician. And they like want to tell their life story. So we created sort of really exciting projects that were blending people's life stories online. And it was just an opportunity to go at it and tell one story in a way that was suddenly meaningful to them. And then if they were actually trying to sell something, we had to focus on what was meaningful and relevant about their story to their audience. So and I just kept developing like the things that I've done. And I went, okay, after a moment, a minute ago, the things that I love doing video production. And I love teaching camera readiness and that sort of thing. And so I had, through another colleague, met a friend. She's a dear friend now, but I didn't know her pre-pandemic. We met just like this,
Right?
and
Yeah. I
she
think
she happens to be local.
that's one of my favorite things about the online business space is how many good friends we make that we may never meet in person. And it's
Right.
such an interesting thing. And I think to your point about 2020 changing everything, that's when businesses realized that, just to kind of go back to that point, like businesses realized that every business is an online business and everyone started to realize the value of this personal brand. And it's not
Yes.
what they think it is. It's, to your point also, it's what matters to your audience. It's like, it's really cool to tell the story of the astrophysicist who's a musician and they've blossomed into this amazing human. But what
Yeah.
about that is, what's the angle? What is going to make people stand up? And more importantly, like, what is the point that they're going to stand up and say, because they're an astrophysicist and a musician, they are uniquely qualified to solve this problem for me. Whether it's a problem of entertainment, whether that they're also now Tevye, or whether, what is it that they bring to this? So I think that's, it's so timely to talk about, especially as people are
Mhm.
deciding whether or not they are going back to the office.
People don't necessarily have people not, and it's not any judgment. Myself included, every human has the hardest time determining for themselves what is it that is interesting about them. It's really, really helpful to get a consult on that, to talk to a professional who actually can sit down and say, let's hear your life story and then outline it, again, details, but like outline it and go, these are the high points that are relevant. I had a client years and years ago. This is pre 2020 even, but she was a jewelry designer, and her jewelry was lovely, but it wasn't like, you know, oh my God, it wasn't like Beyonce's new album cover jewelry. It was like, classic, very classic kind of pieces. And then she's like, actually, what's interesting about it is it's infused with Reiki healing. And I went, okay, well, that's cool. That's like not so far off the path in San Francisco. And I was like, okay, well, tell me more about that. Well, it turns out she was this like Fortune 500 vice president, and she went through unspeakable tragedy with her daughter and her daughter's healing, and in the midst of her tragedy she became somebody who's actually really focused on healing, because what else does one do when their daughter is dying? And so she went in a whole other direction, and her daughter came through it. She quit her job and her life changed forever in focusing on this healing work. And I went, none of that is in your bio. And she's like, do you think people would care? And I was like,
yes, all of
yes,
it.
yes, they do. And so I have a horrible poker face, Erin. Like, I just can't keep it together. And so I was like, yes, that would be really great if you're comfortable talking about that. She's like, oh, of course. I just didn't think anyone would need to know that. And I was like, they do. And so you have it. But again, she's a Fortune 500 vice president. Like, it's not any commentary on the fact that she wasn't a brilliant woman. It's just that she didn't know. And so it really helps when you're working with a new client to sit down and go deep in there, because you don't know what you're going to find out that's actually way more interesting than the I graduated from, I achieved this metric story, right?
Well, and I think, it's interesting. I've been on several podcasts, and probably you've heard this too. You will be talking about stuff and you'll be like, I don't know what's important to other people and what's just stuff that's rattling around in my head or part of what I do. And when people approach you after the fact and they're like, hey, this is interesting, I want to learn more, can we talk? You're like, whoa. And then the other side of your brain goes off and you're like, I should probably talk about this more. 2 or 3 people have reached out to me about this. So this is
Yeah.
really important. But to speak to that, so this jewelry exec, she's undergone like this really interesting career revolution or evolution. Revolution, I guess it's a revolution too, basically. But
Both. Yeah.
so a lot of what you do draws on not only your own career evolution, but also like helping people unpack theirs.
Yes. And
What does that
that is true. The subhead of my whole brand is let's tell your story, because everybody has one that's unique to them. And I know story is a marketing phrase, it's a catchphrase these days. And so I hope it doesn't become ghost to use that in 5 years, because I really feel like that's the truth of what I do. The thing is, telling folks a story and in a relevant and meaningful way is unique to them, and it's unique to what they want to get across. I spoke to another guy some years ago who was a massage therapist, and the thing, like, meeting this guy face to face, I was like, you okay? Like, he wore a fanny pack all the time. It's like, just he didn't strike me right off as the kind of person I was going to be like, yes,
work together?
let's take care of me. However, immediately following my conversation with him, there were 5 people in the room who came up to say, have you ever had a massage with this guy? He's fantastic. And I went, bing, ding, 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 ding. The way to tell his story is not through him, but through his clients. Like, he needs a testimonial central, because nobody's going to believe straight up that if he's standing there going, I've trained at this institute and I'm amazing, because that's not accurate. That's not helpful. The way to tell this guy's story is through other people. They need to vouch for him to make sure that his story is valid. So testimonial gathering is quite hard to make sure that it's done well and meaningfully. And it's also very hard for solopreneurs, especially, to do themselves, because we feel embarrassed, right? We're like, you mind saying something nice about me?
recommendation? Yeah.
And then especially these days, like, a written testimonial is fine, but like, it almost has to be video for it to be punchy. So that's something else I started doing. And then came this next phase where I was like, we really need to help people do better on camera, because 2 years ago, everyone was like, guess what? Everyone's a TV star now. And there was not a guidebook that came with that. And there was not a manual or a how-to. And so this friend that I was mentioning before, she was a theater director. And so we spoke, a very common language with regard to performance qualities. But when we started talking, like, she had to pivot because there was no more live theater for last 2 years, she had to pivot to being an online presenter and coach, and helping people do their job interviews better, and helping students get their MFA auditions online to, so she was switching to the space. And I said, well, I've got a lot of camera training, and you know how to make people feel comfortable and do better online. Let's make a class about it. And so we made a class about it. And we focused it on Zoom being the most prevalent of the online platforms, but it's 98% applicable to Google and Microsoft. And I just heard about Butter. Do you know about Butter? Butter's a new one.
I don't know about Butter. Someone was talking about, I'll have to look it up. It was just a conversation that I saw yesterday on
free ad placement for Butter. I don't know what it is, but I know it's a thing. But even for grandparents doing FaceTime, right? Like there's nobody who got a training about how to do it. So we have honed this class to a solid hour and a half with 3 high points covering the psychology and the physicality and a little bit of technology that can help somebody feel better and more confident online. And that big picture circles back to the beginning where we were talking about like how to make yourself feel good and get up to just a 0 point where you're not distracting or frustrated or scared, and you're just there being you, owning your little part of the world.
Little box. Isn't that weird?
Owning your little box. Yes,
like,
that's it.
In real life, and you're like, oh, you're not a box on my screen. You have legs.
Yeah, or in my case, you're so tall, or whatever it might be.
Oh, you're pocket sized. So.
See, actually, yeah. Erin, that's a huge thing. Now, being online for women who are petite is an astronomical advantage because you have the opportunity to reposition. I mean, we could do a little breakdown if you want to, but like in repositioning your camera, you can be 6'5", like on your screen. You have the opportunity in a way that you don't in real life to dominate a space that would normally be much more challenging to own, because you have the vocal authority and the same amount of room. You take up the same amount of space as everybody else. So it's a really, really huge advantage for women. And this was a big part of it for me, was that I was reading all these stories, right? Wall Street Journal stories about how women are taking the opportunity to stay home or work hybrid. But then there were parallel stories about people who are staying home and working hybrid being left out of the fold. Community culture, they're at work, they're not thought about as much because they're not there to have a coffee or a donut or take a walk with a colleague. So people really need to show up and be more present and more audacious online with regard to their engagement in their meetings. They really have to be a presence, And so I did not want women who took the option to stay home and have that flexible schedule to raise their families to be left behind. They shouldn't sacrifice it. So that's a major prompting for us to want to make sure that we give people the confidence they need to appear solid online.
Well, and so my brain is going in the background, and I've just found I've defined 3 audiences in my head for to share your event with, or to even customize it to their needs. So we'll talk about that offline. But
awesome.
You have an event. Sorry,
we do.
The cat's out of the bag. Really
good. Yeah.
So the cat's out of the bag. You have an event. It's in August 16th, so in 2 weeks.
That's right, August 16th. As we've established, I'm 2 hours ahead of you here in California. So we're running it live from 1 to 2:30, but of course it'll be available because there's no time that works for all the people all the time. So somebody can pick it up after. However, the advantage to being online is that we do a lot of live work, helping people set up their framing, set up practice their introductions. We really want people to walk away with a solid step change, in their expectation of themselves online. And they do. 100% of everybody who's come back to us, whether they started out feeling like their skills were satisfactory or poor or good, everybody at least stepped up 1 grade from where they started. And I was like, that's an investment in an hour and a half like you will not find anywhere else.
Transformation to be able to talk about. That's huge. And so it's 90 minutes. And details are in the link that we've shared. It's on Stefanie's website, Stefanie with an F. Very clear that it's an F, not a PH. This is a long time joke for me internally, because I worked with someone who, as I told you offline, she was like, don't PH me. So I am. Yeah. Stephanie is one of the names that I will not get wrong.
Oh, I appreciate that. I had a colleague. She was a friend in a summer camp years and years and years ago, and she's the one who gave me the mnemonic Steph with an F and E, Steph with an F and E. And I went, oh, that works. I've used it my whole life. It locked in. I have to thank that person forever ago. and the class is on Zoom. The actual formal title of the class: Gain confidence on Zoom, feel, perform, and look better than you ever thought possible. With the caveat that it's 98% applicable, again, to any platform that you're working on, because it's all about confidence, framing, and skills. And so we do give a few extra technical tips that we know about on Zoom, but it's not about making Zoom masters. It's not going deep. So don't have that reflex that goes, well, I don't work on Zoom, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
It does matter. It is applicable.
If you show up ever in an online meeting, it's relevant, but it's probably relevant for in-person meetings too.
Yeah. On my website, there's should be a pop-up that comes up that says, if you want information about the class, register here. There's, yes, Erin has the link that is going up from the services section of my website that also has information about, and testimonials, other people talking about how good it was for them.
And then, so that's at 1 p.m. your time. So it's 4 p.m. Eastern. And that, it's time zones are so tricky. I have friends in India and Australia and China and the UK and South Africa, and it is impossible to find a time that works for everyone. So 2 o'clock, anywhere between 1 and 4 Eastern generally works for most people in the world somewhere.
Most of the people. But, if you have to pick up your kid at 4 o'clock and it's 4 o'clock on the East Coast, like, it's okay. Go do it. And you'll still get the same kind of training and understanding. And my colleague is Tara Blas-Smolin, and she is amazing in her own right. And you'll get your emails, and we can offer some thoughts if you can take a screenshot of your setup if you still need some help afterwards, because we really do want people to take the time to set themselves up correctly and confidently. And we want to support folks in this online medium, because this was just, again, it's not natural. Things are amplified here that are not in real life. If you take a drink of a water bottle and you crunches down as you're drinking, here in this space, it's like it's an earthquake and it's horrible. Whereas if it's in a cafe or around a coffee, around a table, even a board meeting, like, people would notice, but it'd be a split second. Whereas here, it's like, what is that person doing? And why are they a horrible person?
Why do they keep touching their nose? Why do they touch their face? Oh man, wasn't that interesting? Like, and I've been on Zoom since, as I touch my face now, because I'm talking about it. I have to. My nose is itching. But yeah, so I mean, I think, what I was going to say, I've been on Zoom since 2016, but it wasn't an everyday thing. It was maybe a couple times a week. Then with my business, I really started to do it more in 2019. So by the time 2020 rolled around, I was like, not an old pro per se, but I was able to help some other people be like, all right. So you click start, and then, the basics are now so ingrained in all of us. Like, my 5-year-old knew how to use Zoom before he could type.
Yeah. Well, certainly the ideas are, and yet it's shocking, like, to have friends at major tech companies who tell stories about the nose pickers, the toenail cutters around their professional in their meetings. It gives you the shivers, but it's a thing.
Does. Yeah.
And so another part of what we're doing is honing this to class for businesses in particular who are like, we've got new teams that are that are going out that are now hybrid, are going to stay hybrid. Let's give them some more some more functionality. Like, let's help teams communicate better, because that will make everybody more effective, make more money, and be more expeditious in their in their achievements. Because other studies have shown how remote teams or hybrid teams are lagging, because when there's part at work and part at home, they're not communicating as well. So let's get that communication going, folks, and we can help you. Tara and I can help you do that in the course.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking
oh my God,
this half hour
has
flown by. It always does. By. And I would love to continue the conversation. soon. We'll have to have you back and discuss more. But if you are interested in the class, it's in the link. We'll also make sure to share that out so it pops up, with all the different social networks, it pops up differently.
Wonderfully.
And then head on over to Stefanie's website to learn more about her and what she does. You and what you do, I guess. Who am I talking to here? So the ever-going question, never-ending question of copywriting.
I love taking on individual clients who are really like at this precipice of their own existence, where they're like, I need to do something more, but I don't know how, and I don't have time. I go, I do that. I can help. Like, we'll tell your story in an effective way and cut through the stuff that doesn't matter. So, doesn't waste your time and money. That's a really big part of what I do, is going, you don't need that. And so we can get to the end more expeditiously.
And there's so much fluff. There's so much fluff that's not necessary. So
thank you so much for the time, Erin. It's really fun talking to you.